Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 27th of July, 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host this afternoon, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson.
Afternoon.
And behind the technical desk, we have Nick Green. Well, the weather. I think actually we're just going to leave the weather. It was so appalling over the weekend, particularly yesterday, and pretty grim here in Plymouth. I think most other people in the country are having some pretty gloomy weather. If you're not, do tell us and we'll give you a special word tomorrow. That's it. Enough of the weather.
Just before we start the news, can I mention Kent?
Indeed.
So on Friday I was up in Kent, down in Kent, across in Kent, somewhere anyway in Kent, talking to a corporate audience, and I had quite an enjoyable time doing it. I think they had mostly an enjoyable time listening to it. And in the evening, I met the embryonic Kent group, which is great to meet those people, and I just want to thank everybody that was involved in that, because it was a good day. I think we opened a few eyes during the afternoon, and then in the evening we got some planning done, which was really good.
And the subject was money, Mike.
It was,
money
yes.
And banking.
Indeed.
Well, what better place to start? A quick update on the Tom Crawford house repossession affair. And of course, what is this matter really about? Well, it's about the fact that we are seeing corrupt courts assisting principally private bailiffs companies to simply steal people's properties. And Tom and his team did manage to get back into his own house on Friday, which UK Column reported, and they were able to stay with the house until early hours, I believe, of Saturday morning, when the police arrived, tried to get them out, but later the individuals occupying Tom Crawford's house agreed to step down, whereupon they were arrested. And I believe it's 8 who've been held by the police altogether. We're expecting an update from Guy Taylor hopefully tomorrow, so we will bring you right up to date tomorrow. But just to summarise on the key issue today, and that is of course that the Crawford family have still not seen the key document, the warrant, the court warrant, which resulted in the bailiffs turning up, of course, with massive support of Nottinghamshire police in order to take Tom Crawford's property. Now, we're going to speak later in the programme about what local media did and did not report. But one of the things they certainly haven't reported is, of course, that there's been a High Court judgment saying that the lower courts should release all court papers to Tom Crawford and his family, including the original warrant. Now, I'll show the inset High Court document in a bit more detail in a couple of seconds, but there's a number of very good video clips on the internet. Apologies, whoever took this video clip, I couldn't establish exactly who it was. We're happy to credit you. But this shows Guy Taylor speaking to one of the senior police officers on site at Tom Crawford's house. And of course, what he was saying to him is this whole matter could be stopped instantly if I can see the original signed warrant. And despite the fact the guy is saying to the policeman there that here is this High Court document which says, in particular, court staff are requested to provide the defendants with copies of any warrants of possession and orders for possessions. So a High Court document saying that Tom Crawford and of course Guy Taylor is assisting them as a lay legal advisor, that they should be provided with a copy of the original warrant. That original warrant still not provided. So what is going on here? We have corrupt British courts aided by Nottinghamshire police to steal property because there are no documents. Who are the overall winners in this game? Well, of course, it's the banks.
Indeed. So today we have to say happy birthday to the Bank of England, 321 years old today. Hopefully it won't see another birthday, but don't hold that much hope for that at the moment. Now, the bank would be very keen to tell you that they began life as the government's banker and as the government's debt manager. And they claim that this is a role they still fulfill. Unfortunately, it's not the only role that they fulfill these days, because today, of course, they also run the Monetary Policy Committee, which sets interest rates and tries to manage inflation. It regulates the financial system with responsibility for making sure bankers don't break the rules. So it does a good job there. It acts as a broker for the Queen, stockbroker for the Queen and other heads of state through Bank of England Nominees Limited, its nominee company, and it provides wholesale banking services to commercial banks. So I think we've got to be a bit careful here, because this is not a national bank. Let's remind ourselves it is a private central bank operating in the interests of its private customers, of which the government is only one. Of course, we've got to ask the question, in whose interest is the Bank of England operating? Is it actually primarily operating in the interests of the nation, or is it operating in the interests of its other customers? When I asked them that question, they didn't seem too inclined to answer in any meaningful way. Of course, let's not forget that the Bank of England's role, as I mentioned a second ago, as policeman for the financial community. After all, it recognises criminality when it sees it, doesn't it? I mean, this is from March, I think, this year, where they sacked a foreign exchange dealer for a string of misjudgments.
Oh, right. So we've got large-scale banks absolutely changing interest rates in order to make profit. No problem.
No problem. But when a member of their own staff does it, it's not a criminal act. It's not
punishable. It's misjudgment.
Corruption. It's just a misjudgment.
Yeah.
So this is the organisation in charge of managing the sort of the veracity of the financial system. I don't think they're really equipped. They're certainly not independent.
No, well, maybe these are Canadian views, because, of course, whatever the Bank of England is or is not, we've got a Canadian heading it up. So his interests are clearly not for Britain. They must be for Canada, presumably. Well, maybe this is a good point just to bring in this little booklet here, which is becoming available. It's called "What Exactly is Austerity?" Answer is just a huge provable lie. This has been written by Justin Walker from the British Constitution Group, and it's an excellent little booklet which is pulling apart how the corrupt international banking system works and showing absolutely that we're being told austerity means we've got to cut hospitals, cut the military, cut roads, cut everything apart from MP salaries, of course. But as Justin proves in this little book, it is one big lie. And we could solve the trouble in this country and indeed other countries worldwide overnight by getting a grip of the monetary system. So we will tell you more about that little booklet in due course. Well, if we talk about money, obviously the Chancellor is very much in the driving seat. And thank you very much to the viewer who pointed out this interesting little video clip, which is on YouTube, in which Dennis Skinner MP is simply calling George Osborne a coquette. It's quite remarkable. Mr. Skinner is obviously a man who has still got views and values which count. And what he says is the only thing that was growing then were the lines of coke in front of Boy George. He's clearly indicating the Chancellor and the rest of them. And what was the result of this comment? That he was asked to leave the chamber. So if you stand up in the House at the moment and actually talk about what is going on, the Speaker simply says, well, you're telling the truth, you better leave. Well, let's have a look at the man.
Yes, because he's out of the country. He's making the first of what's being called a series of trips to key EU capitals, and so he's in Paris. He went there yesterday. He's there for a couple of days for talks, with more visits planned later on in the year. Yesterday he had dinner with the French economy minister Emmanuel Macron, and Macron has said that the UK should not be able to cherry pick aspects of the EU. And of course, this is all about European Union renegotiations. So he's also going to meet the French Finance Minister Michel Sapin and Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius. And he's going to say today, if he hasn't already said it, we have been returned to office with a very clear mandate to improve Britain's relationship with the rest of the EU and reform the EU. I want to see a new settlement for Europe, one that makes a more competitive and dynamic continent to ensure it delivers prosperity and security for all of the people within it, not just for those in Britain. And he's going to say this government wants the UK to play a leading role within a reformed EU. So what is this reformed EU that he's referring to? Perhaps this man gave us a clue last week because he wrote, I think it was Sunday week ago, an article in Journal du Dimanche in which he said a government of the Eurozone with a specific budget as well as a parliament to ensure democratic control. That's what he was calling for. And of course, we've got to remember that of course, that's Francois Hollande, the president of France. And we've got to remember back in March, Jean-Claude Juncker demanding a European army to be established. He said, you would not create a European army to use it immediately, but a common army among the Europeans would convey to Russia that we are serious about defending the values of the European Union. Such an army would help us design a common foreign and security policy. So what we actually have here is two major European leaders calling for absolute federalism. They're talking about European foreign and security policy. They're talking about a European Treasury, European Parliament, proper European Parliament. So that's what really Osborne and Cameron are up to, because we know Cameron went and did a similar tour a week, well, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Osborne's continuing the work. And it's absolutely clear that part and parcel of this referendum that is going to be created in Britain in the next year, 18 months, the sort of rhetoric around that is going to be the renegotiation of Europe. We're talking about the end of nation states and full federal United States of Europe.
And of course, London, no longer the capital city of this country, but simply a city region, right. I think it was identified as. So if you wonder what is happening to London at the moment, city region under the European plan. Well, of course, with Europe, you must vote and get it right, because if you vote and get it wrong, you have to have another vote. And who better to pick up on this than Alex Salmond? And he was being interviewed by Andrew Marr. And what's he saying? Well, it's the same as Ireland, isn't it? If you vote and don't get the right answer, we just have to have another vote until the right answer's coming out. But he's saying, Alex Salmond is saying that it's inevitable there's going to be another referendum.
Yeah.
I must agree with him, because they want that right decision. That was the wording. I think a second independence referendum is inevitable. The question, of course, is not the inevitability, it is the timing.
Well, what, with a view to catching people on the hop or something? Well,
I would imagine so. When they think they got the best chance of getting their way through, then you're going to run the referendum. It's exactly what David Cameron's going to do. Of course, what did Andrew Marr not ask? Well, he didn't go anywhere near the Holly Gregg abuse papers. Because, of course, questions over what happened to those abuse papers have still not surfaced. However, we've got some pretty interesting things happening south of the border. BBC has never, ever reported on the Holly Gregg case. And one of their journalists, of course, was pulled off when it got a bit too hot to handle. So that's the state in Scotland. And overseas, we've got more trouble brewing, because Turkey's now said they want discussions with NATO, because they've had explosions going off, and they're getting worried about Islamic State terrorists. So this is the picture of the meeting. All looks pretty civilised there, I have to say, rather different from the schoolboy behaviour in Westminster. But interestingly enough, when you start to look at the pictures from the bombing incident, there's just something about it, Mike. I'm going to be very cautious here, but some of these images to me just don't quite look right. And we know that the BBC's finally had to respond to freedom of information requests, where people were asking, did the BBC interfere with images over the so-called children's
Was this the napalm incident?
The napalm incident in Syria. So we're going to look into that particular Syrian incident in more depth. But many people, of course, are saying be very, very cautious with images being shown because quite often these have been interfered with in order to push across a political agenda. And that's probably a good point to introduce Libya.
Well, actually, Cameron is talking about bombing Libya again, but this is in the run-up to a trade mission to the Southeast Asia. So it's quite interesting that he's talking about this in connection with that. Apparently he's going to be joined by 31 representatives from businesses right across the UK, and he's expecting to be able to sign deals worth £750 million, which is going to create 270 new jobs. That seems quite a sum, but anyway, I'll leave people to think about that. But in the run-up to this trade negotiation, he's talking about ISIL and saying that that's going to be a main focus of the visit. So
this is ISIL that President Obama is on video record saying that the Americans are supporting and helping to train.
That's right. He said if there is a threat to Britain or to our people on our streets, we are able to stop it by taking immediate action against that threat. As Prime Minister, I will always want to try and take that action. This is the case whether that problem is emanating from Libya, from Syria, or anywhere else. He said in a statement, he said, ISIL is one of the biggest threats our world has faced. Well, he should know since he created it. But anyway, all of us face a threat from foreign fighters and from increased radicalisation within our countries, and it's right that we look at what help we can provide to one another. I think Britain can offer expertise on practical counter-terrorism work, dealing with the threat from foreign fighters and investigating potential terrorist plots. And I think Britain can learn from Indonesia and Malaysia on the work they have done to tackle the extremist ideology and to build tolerant and resilient societies. But it seems that the Foreign Office and David Cameron, or at least they think that David Cameron perhaps has gone a bit too far with some of the things that he's been talking about, because they are now denying that there's any intention to bomb Libya. They're saying that they're supporting progress towards a UN-mediated ceasefire and a stable political settlement in Libya. That's their immediate priority. They're saying the UK has no plans to launch airstrikes over Libya, and they're saying we're working closely with international and regional partners to support the Libyans to tackle terror groups, and are discussing how to use existing UN Security Council resolutions to sanction terrorist groups in Libya, including groups affiliated to ISIS. So I don't think, they don't seem to know what each other's doing.
I think basically the moment Cameron runs off script, he's got problems. He's getting carried away. I was going to say earlier on one of the slides, you look at the eyes of George Osborne. There isn't anything there.
No.
There's no. These people, of course, are not making up policy. They're not involved in the policy. They just go out front and the puppet spouting the words. So if he forgot his words, he could go anywhere really. Quite a bit of cabbage patch actually coming in Mr. Cameron's face, I see there. So what have we got here? Sensitive Foreign Office papers.
Well, indeed, because it's not just Cameron who's, perhaps if I use the word deployed, because this is an incredible story, it seems, and a fascinating admission, but from the government that Tony Blair has been given access to what they're calling diplomatic cables and other documents ahead of meetings in Beijing, and these are supposedly commercial business meetings. And who gave him these documents? The Foreign Office officials. So what do you think, Brian? Is this just the old boys network at here, or is Blair actually a paid British agent?
Well, yeah, paid British agent, I would say, for causing trouble in the world, which he's done a really good job of. But it is quite incredible. Is this man part of the government or not? You seem like Mandelson, you seem to be able to drift in and drift out, depending which way the wind's blowing. Immensely dangerous, because we've no idea who is actually running the country. I
mean, if a member of the military, for example, who had a certain security clearance while he was employed by the Ministry of Defence retires, he doesn't still get access to that material in his retirement, does he?
Absolutely not.
So how does that work for politicians?
Because they're running a completely different agenda. And as somebody said in the chat room, and I totally agree with it, these people are actually the threat. Our own government is the threat, because these people are working outside their authority to a common purpose. it's becoming pretty obvious. And of course, have you more on that one?
No,
Otherwise,
that's
I think
fine.
we should get on to what it's really about and the standard of Britain's politicians, people who are deciding what the future of our constitution are going to be, apparently been busted.
Right, well, what can we say?
Gruesome.
Yeah, Lord Sewer, is that his name? Sewell, sorry. Lord Sewell, busted. I have to say, you know, aside from the actual content of what has happened here, one of the things that I wanted to highlight before we talk about the man himself was just the type of reporting that's going on here, because once again we have the Murdoch press presenting these types of headlines. I just wanted to sort of remember the News of the World. It's a very similar type, style of headline. Of course, what did this lead to? It led to the Leveson inquiry, which we exposed as being a common purpose front. Is that
scam?
A scam? Yeah. And of course, our reporting was in February 2012, and then in November 2012, the Daily Mail expanded on the work that we did and absolutely demonstrated the links between common purpose and what was going on with the Leveson inquiry through the Media Standards Trust and so on. So I am suggesting today that this is a sort of a reboot, a reset of the attempt to bring about controls of the press by the government. We're going to see many more of these types of sensationalist headlines over the next period of time, and we'll see many more calls, in fact, about the disgraceful behaviour of the British press, driven mainly by the Murdoch press, in my opinion. But if we can just focus on this for a second, because this is Ian Dunt. If I remember rightly, and I could be wrong about this, he did give evidence at Leveson, I think. And what he's saying here is what Lord Sewell gets up to is none of our business. And he's saying it's time to get on. It's time to get on the scandal bus. Lord Sewell has been photographed taking cocaine with prostitutes. He's dressed up in a leather jacket with a bra in a manner which suggests he is relaxed about having a good time. He sits about chatting politics with women of the night. Let's all have a laugh. We can all gather around the reliable English mixture of Protestant moralising and lewd childish jeering and have a good time at his expense. So this guy really trying to undermine the real point of this story by suggesting that it's just some twisted morality which is being presented by the media. And he ends up by saying it's exactly the same as the great ritual humiliations of the Tudor courts half a millennia ago, from the bawdy public songs of the self-important constitutional contortions of the great and good. We can dress it up how we like, just as they did, but we really haven't changed all that much. All that's missing is the village stocks. But of course, this doesn't, I mean, he's completely missing the point, isn't he? Because the question is, if this man is behaving like this in his private life, how is he behaving in his public life? Of course, what was it, 3-4 months ago, we saw George Osborne himself behaving very strangely while he was sitting at the left hand of David Cameron, and it looked very much like he had been taking some type of drugs, whether it was prescription drugs or whatever. So the question is, how does this affect this man's judgment when he is actually operating as a politician of the realm, as it were? And also, what does his behaviour, how does his behaviour leave him open to blackmail? And of course, this has always been one of the control mechanisms that has been used in politics in this country. So this isn't just a simple case of making a moral decision. This is about somebody who is employed as a public servant and what risks this places on his ability to do his job.
And of course, we need to remember what he's been doing, because it's Lord Sewell who's been the key man pushing through all of the Scottish devolution. So Lord Sewell has been pushing for huge changes in our constitution and the way the United Kingdom sticks together. My question is, when he made his decisions and made those reports, was he high on cocaine then? If you look at some of his comments, he's one of the people saying that, of course, that independence for Scotland is actually a good thing for the Union. That's a pretty interesting statement. Was he on drugs at the time? We've no way of knowing. So I think political commentators like that might very, very dangerous people, because do we want these sorts of people running the country? I think The average person would say definitely not, and yet we're being told we've got to accept them. Where does it lead? Well, it ultimately leads to the fact that you have a British state that is prepared to threaten, harass and bully child abuse victims. We'd just like to play you this short video clip of Nottingham Beechwood child abuse whistleblower Melanie Shaw talking about Nottinghamshire Police under Chief Constable Chris Eyre having another go at smashing their way into a property. What does this woman have to suffer? Why does she have to continue to suffer when she's been brave enough to stand up and tell the truth about her own abuse and that of many other youngsters in the Nottingham area? Just have a look at this video clip.
Friday the 24th of July, on the 22nd of July, I'm sat at home, and Nottinghamshire Police, on behalf of the Cambridgeshire Force, the Derbyshire Force and themselves, broke into my house yet again. 2 police cars and a riot van came. I'm handcuffed in my lounge, dragged onto my garden and arrested on suspicion of harassment under 3 forces. They put me at a risk 4 MAPRAV and alerted all police forces. I've been held in custody for 27 hours. No inspector has authorised my detainment for more than 24 hours, which is illegal. I've not been charged with anything and I've not been bailed with anything. I've been released. I've been beaten up in the police van. I was took out to hospital for no apparent reason and just drove back. Members of the public at the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham filmed that and then dragged in a police van to be put in a cage at the side door by a male officer alone. He's gone and injured my hand, nearly breaking my wrist. It's all swollen and the skin's damaged. It's bruised on the inner bit of my arm, and I've just come back from my Dr. Mark Stevens and had it examined. I'll be putting a complaint in to the Police Complaints Commission about my treatment and injuries in custody and the fact that no inspector came and authorised my detention. All this again is for trying to stand up for the rights of children in care today that are still being abused, and the fake and false investigation into Operation Daybreak. I'm not going to shut up, I'm not going to go away, and if you want to keep intimidating me, the more that you harangue, harass, bully, assault and abuse me, the more you make it worse for yourself. Mickey Summers is standing by me, the rest of the public are, and the other people that are absolutely disgusted by Police Nottingham. You showed your true colours on the UK column, archive footage from the 23rd, that is archived on ukcolumn.org/archives, where when we hired a function room at the Tally-Ho pub to speak about Tom Crawford's illegal eviction, because we'd gone and hired a function room to do filming, armed police, two lots of armed police, 9 other vehicles, riot vans, you got police tape and sealed off a private estate of detached properties. No crime had been committed. We're not frightened of you, Nottinghamshire Police. We're not 300, 500 random members of the public that will stand by and watch the police brutality carried out by Chris Eyre, and just because you're in uniforms think you're doing your job. We won't tolerate that. We won't be silenced, and we're not going away. I don't know if Wendy's going to say something, because you was troubled, weren't you, when you got a broken arm by the police?
I was visited by Cambridgeshire Police the day after Melanie left my home, and they were quite intimidating. 2 females came in the house, tried to frighten me into telling them Melanie's whereabouts, which I refused to tell them. When I opened the door to let them out, there were 2 huge policemen outside the door. I could not stop laughing. Right, that's...
Well, what an amazing video clip, and how brave is Melanie Shaw, quite extraordinary. There she is standing up for her rights and those of other child abuse survivors. She's got a smashed door behind her. She's had a back door trashed by Nottinghamshire Police. Thugs in uniform is how they've been described. She's been bullied, harassed, followed, thrown in prison, put in solitary confinement, denied medical treatment. And while she suffers that, we've got Lord Sewell spending money on cocaine and prostitutes on his £300 a day allowance from the Lords. And we've got Chris Eyre, beg your pardon, we've got the Chief Constable of Nottingham Police, who is Chris Eyre, who is able to put big teams out on the streets, not only for Melanie Shaw, but also, of course, for Tom Crawford. What is going on in Britain? Well, what we're looking at really is we are close on the edge of a complete breakdown of law and order, not in the streets, not on the streets, but in Westminster itself. Well, let's bring in Justice Goddard, because of course at the moment we're to believe that this 63rd rate New Zealand judge is going to run a massive inquiry into child abuse in UK. We posted some time ago one of our diagrams just showing the catalogue of abuse against Melanie Shaw. We've identified, of course, David Cameron and Theresa May as being two of the key culprits, along with Alison Saunders from the CPS. But we're now very pleased to say that members of the public have asked directly to the Goddard inquiry, will Justice Goddard make a statement regarding protection from the police and social services for Melanie Shaw, for public confidence in her inquiry? Will she make a statement to the government warning them not to use the police as a weapon to silence child abuse witnesses and victims? Now, this is very, very important information, because finally now we've got the public taking Goddard to account, holding her to account, because if she does not protect child abuse victims such as Melanie Shaw from intimidation by the very organisation she's supposed to be investigating for their participation in child abuse, then quite clearly her inquiry is itself a complete farce. So if you're motivated by what's been happening to Melanie Shaw, and of course Mickey Summers and the thousands of other children abuse victims, perhaps you might consider making contact with the Goddard inquiry to ask if they will make a public statement explaining just how they are going to protect child abuse victims and whistleblowers from intimidation, not from paedophiles, but from police forces such as Nottinghamshire Police. We wait with great interest to see how that develops.
Particularly since these police forces are helping with the cover-up in the first place.
Well, that is it, Mike. It's just so clear everywhere we go across the country where youngsters, adults now are coming forward to talk about child abuse. It is evident that the police at the time covered up, and the police today are still doing everything possible to cover up. Well, have a look at the Mirror, because the Mirror a couple of days ago was highlighting the case of the Angel Children's Home, which is Lambeth, London. And what the article is saying is that the Blair government was briefed about police probing paedophiles, including a Labour minister, but then, surprise, surprise, the whole thing was halted. So the Daily Mirror said that they'd obtained papers which prove for the first time that Mr. Driscoll's children's home probe was being monitored by senior civil servants and ministers before it was halted. They include briefings written for the Blair administration just hours after the detective allegedly first named the minister as a suspect. This is a Labour minister. The officer was removed from the investigation 3 months later. So this is pretty standard. Well, two of the then ministers mentioned are Frank Dobson and Paul Boateng. And let's have a look at how these pieces fit together. This is the key document, which is available if you go to the Mirror's site. But just in the interest of getting it up on screen, background: Liverpool police have been investigating and conducting a major investigation, Operation Cart, is that, I think, into a number of allegations of paedophile activity in Merseyside children's homes. So this is part of the start of it, and there's Mr. Carroll mentioned in the middle of it. And what the Mirror is saying is that this document, together with pages and pages of other material about these paedophile rings, including members of Westminster, were put into the Blair administration. So Tony Blair, I mean, everywhere you go for this man, there's trouble, whether it's death and destruction, excuse me, overseas, or we're dealing with child abuse, it would seem, at home. So these are the people implicated. Frank Dobson, of course, none of them remember very much. Perhaps we'll have a little bit of Alzheimer's creeping in later. But a person that interested UK column was this lady, Dame Platt, former social services inspector. And in the article by the Mirror, it said a confidential memo written by SSI Chief Inspector Denise Platt stated Mr. Boateng was at the centre of a perceived conflict of interest because his wife Janet had been the chair of Lambeth Social Services during a period in the 1980s. Ms. Platt, who was made a dame in 2004, is currently a trustee of the NSPCC.
That's the same NSPCC that is so closely linked to the Goddard inquiry.
Indeed. And sorry, Ms. Platt, who was made a dame in 2004, is currently a trustee of the NSPCC, has denied being told the minister was being investigated or being involved in providing any briefings to ministers about the Lambeth investigation in 1998. And of course, you're spot on, Mike, because here she is as an NSPCC trustee. But of course, NSPCC, we now know, is the Goddard inquiry. You make a call to their helpline. You're not talking to Goddard inquiry staff. You're being routed back into the NSPCC, which appears to be now possibly implicated in the cover-up of child abuse. So we were very interested in this subject because back in February 2015, we noticed that if you went to the Metropolitan Police website to look at Operation U-Tree, the number they told you to ring was not the Met Police, it was in fact NSPCC. Apologies, small frog appeared from somewhere. This is what we said: Dear Met Police, I've just visited the Metropolitan Police website and was surprised to find that the contact number for Operation U-Tree is for NSPCC and not the Met. In our own work helping individuals who've been abused in care, many are deeply suspicious of NSPCC and NSPCC staff. Can you please explain how the Met can justify this promotion of NSPCC to the public as an equivalent to the Met Police Service regarding contact with vulnerable individuals who wish to impart sensitive and confidential information to the police, which may well pertain to criminal activity of a serious sexual nature? We look forward to your response. But the underlying requirement for this is, how can the Met Police investigate organisations they're in bed with? There's no independence, and therefore if you're a child abuse victim, how can you trust the police? Because you're not dealing with the Met Police, you're dealing with NSPCC. Well, what did they do? They sent nothing, and eventually we had to send a chaser, and back came this reply: Dear Mr. Gerrish, your inquiry is currently with our Specialist Crime and Operations Press Desk. We shall ask them to progress the matter as soon as possible. Kind regards, Matt. Well, I don't know who Matt is, but we did wonder whether it could be Matt Tapp, who of course has been closely involved with media and press coverage for the police in a number of high-profile cases, including at one stage with Melanie Shaw. Now, this could be a different Matt, but why would this question be so difficult for the Met Police to answer? Well, eventually they did come back with a response. This is what they said. The webpage in question refers to the announcement that U-Tree was to move from an assessment to an investigation. At that time, the operational number for Operation U-Tree had not been set up. Therefore, the NSPCC was given as a sensible alternative in the interim. We recognise and understand that individuals will not always want to speak to police. It's for this reason that we will often signpost individuals to agencies such as NSPCC and NAPAC in relation to investigations of this nature. Throughout the course of Operation U-Tree, the NSPCC and NAPAC have proved invaluable partners to the Metropolitan Police Service, taking a number of calls from victims. We have every confidence they have the relevant skills and knowledge to deal with vulnerable individuals in the most sensitive manner. It is for this reason that we've continued to promote their number and that of NAPAC alongside our own. So Metropolitan Police doing a serious investigation, and they can't set up a telephone line. They can, well, it was City of London police can spend 1.5 to 3 million chasing Ian Puddock, but the police, when they're going to investigate massive child abuse, can't actually set up a telephone line, so they push it across to NSPC. And now we've got some pretty heavy questions being asked about the role of senior NSPCC trustees to do with cover-up of child abuse.
It's interesting because it parallels a little bit the child abuse inquiry itself, because the child abuse inquiry, the domain name for that is csa-inquiry.independent.gov.uk. So it's apparently a government, an independent government initiative, and yet they're using Google's email services. And so you've got to say that if somebody wants to contact them in a confidential manner, there is no confidentiality. And it's the same if somebody wants to contact the Met in a confidential manner, they're promoting a telephone number which isn't even the Metropolitan Police. It's quite an incredible situation.
Well, it's extraordinary, unless you say is something very, very dirty and underhand going on, that the police deliberately do not want to do their jobs. So what do? You spread responsibility sideways. They can later claim, well, of course, it wasn't us, it was them over there, but they're working together. This is an absolute abuse of power. Misconduct in public office is what I would say. But how interesting that we can now show trouble, it would appear, with NSPCC. Met Police says it's not interested. Perhaps that's why they haven't actually managed to catch any paedophiles within the establishment and around Westminster.
Okay, a couple of general stories then. Interesting comments from Poland with regard to the euro and their entry into the euro. This is former Polish Prime Minister Marek Belka, who is currently head of the Polish Central Bank. And he gave an interview with the Daily Telegraph and said, he was asked about Poland joining the Eurozone, and he said, you shouldn't rush when there is still smoke coming from a house that was burning. So it's simply not safe to do so. As long as the Eurozone has problems with some of its own members, don't expect us to be enthusiastic about joining. So that's pretty interesting. You know, Poland, which has demonstrated itself to be an absolute puppet of the West, of Europe, of NATO, of everybody, absolutely refusing to get involved in the euro, just too hot to handle at the moment. And meanwhile, back here, Jeremy Corbyn continues to face the most unbelievable vitriol from just about every direction. It's quite incredible. You know, I'm not going to say that I'm particularly in support of Jeremy Corbyn's policies, aside from the fact that he openly supports proper splitting up of the banks. So I certainly support that policy. But whether I support many of his others, I can't say. In the meantime, you know, they're now saying that if he does win the leadership election of the Labour Party, they're going to actively work against him from within and attempt to destroy. So what does this tell you about the Labour establishment if they are coming out and saying to their membership, if you vote for this man, we will work to destroy the party from within and absolutely will not get behind the leader that you have chosen?
Well, I think what we're seeing here is maybe the last battle between old Labour and new Labour, Mike. That's one thing. The other thing is how fascinating that I think it was Andrew Marr again asked Jeremy Corbyn, are you a Marxist? And then several of the papers are making a big thing that he said, well, actually, I haven't read enough of Marx. But you had Ed Miliband, who sits there bred and groomed in a Marxist family. BBC doesn't ask him the question at all. In fact, anybody who did was some sort of racist. Just they are really going for this man. They're obviously very frightened of him.
Indeed, it's incredible.
Well, have a look at this lady, because you would have thought that Theresa May would have been going flat out to deal with child abuse in the establishment. But no, she's been in an empty parliament in order to spar with Boris Johnson over water cannon. And apparently she's got pretty tough and said that the police need to put forward a proper business case to see whether they can have their water cannon. And Boris Johnson is not really giving in, but he says he's backed by David Cameron. So just have a look at it. Empty house there, no interest amongst MPs, but interesting words, isn't it? Theresa May says it's to do with a business case from the police.
Well, it's interesting. You say it's an empty house, Brian, but of course there's about 4 or 5 times more people there that were at the last child sexual abuse debate.
Yeah.
So clearly, you know, we've got 650 MPs in that parliament, and 3 of them are actually actively attempting to campaign on the issue of protecting people from children from sexual abuse. So it is a relatively full house there.
Yeah. Now I know we're just about on our normal time, but we will keep running for this because I think it's important. Daily Mail and other papers picking up on the fact that there was a secret meeting to discuss Operation Tempora, which was talking about putting 5,000 or more heavily armed troops on the streets if necessary in Britain to fight jihadis in the event of a terror attack. Now, what was interesting about this story is that it only broke because part of the discussions were posted on the new police chief's council website. The Mail saw it and took some of the document down, whereby the police removed it. This was the guy who'd actually briefed the police on what was going to happen and the fact this vast number of troops were going to be involved. This is DCC Simon Chesterton. And some people have picked up on it. Baroness Jones, who sits on London's Police and Crime Committee, said she was shocked at the plans, saying this would be unprecedented on mainland Britain. And she expressed concern the troops would not be sufficiently trained to protect civil liberties. Police leaders apparently fear that the soldiers would be needed if there was a wave of attacks by extremists inspired by Islamic State or Al-Qaeda, as police forces no longer have enough manpower to cope. This is because of the cuts in police force, they're saying, G4S taking over the jobs. But somebody contacted us and said there's something really dirty going on here, and this is why they were interested. They picked up on the fact that to handle the level of material being discussed, you would need to have gone through security clearances, developed vetting, DV. Chief constables apparently are DV cleared. This is required for access to top secret. And if you're going to be cleared, they're going to have a look at these things around you. This is very in-depth vetting, baseline personnel security, standard departmental company records checks, security questionnaire, criminal record check, credit reference check, social service check, check of medical and psychological information, and interviews not only with the subject themselves but also friends and family. So very in-depth stuff. And what was being pointed out to us is that where did they hold this top secret meeting? They held it in a hotel in Leicester, and our experienced sources say that to use a hotel to discuss that level of classified information is itself a breach of the Official Secrets Act. So we've got politicians who don't know what's being discussed about bringing troops onto Britain's streets. Where are the discussions? In some committee room in a hotel in Leicester. Who's discussing the police? Who else was there? We don't know. Is the country being run by Westminster? It doesn't look like it to us.
Well, okay, so local media then. This is an interesting little blog post, and I do recommend that people go and have a look at it. It's from the nosanctuary.net blog. It's anti-social media in Cornwall, and they're looking at Local World. Now, the image at the bottom there is Mr. David Montgomery, who's the Chief Executive of Local World Limited. And the blog is saying that Local World Limited is a large regional newspaper publisher in the UK which publishes around 100 print titles and has in excess of 70 websites. Local World Limited was formed in 2012 by David Montgomery, a former Chief Executive of Trinity Mirror, and brought together Northcliffe Media from the Daily Mail and General Trust and iLife News and media from Yattenden Group. And the purchase of the businesses was approved by the Office of Fair Trading and towards the end of June 2013. And within a year, the OFT closed its responsibilities were passed to a number of different other organisations. Now, although the point that's being made here is that although some people thought that Local World would breathe what they're calling new life into regional newspapers. Others recognise that this was a pretty bad situation, and they quote David Montgomery as saying, "We will harvest content and publish it without human interface. We will harvest content and publish it without human interface." And his vision is that press officers from the police, hospitals, councils, schools, businesses and other organisations should be invited to provide the majority of stories, usually by self-service, so they get to publish to themselves, and they will be given a larger measure of control as trust is developed. And there's much more information, background information on this blog post, so do go and have a look at it. But really, I just thought that was a pretty staggering statement to be making from Montgomery, saying that press officers from the police, hospitals and councils in particular basically get to write their own copy, publish it on the website by themselves on these local news websites, as if it's independently curated news in some way or independently investigated news. This goes beyond the current situation where journalists are really rehashing press releases, where press releases can be directly published. That's a pretty scary development for democracy, is it not?
It is, and we can perhaps give an example of what's going on at the moment. Let's return just very briefly to the Tom Crawford case, because what's the Nottingham Post, the local newspaper, been doing? Well, it hasn't been delving into the corruption in the courts. It hasn't been asking questions about the warrants and why this family has had to go to the High Court to try and drag the documentation out. Nottingham Post not interested in that at all. What they've started to spin out is that neighbours are very upset because they're living in fear that the protesters will return. Now, this is a small cul-de-sac, and it's been very obvious over the last few days that the neighbours have been highly supportive of the Crawfords, and that is what has allowed the Crawfords to keep going. But now we've got local MP Mr Coker coming in saying, "I'm really very sorry about the problems at Fern Chase. I've seen how awful it is visually alongside the problems of the ongoing security and the protests." So does the MP get his nose into corruption in Britain's courts? No, he follows along the spun story by the Nottingham Post. And then just compare these. So Nottingham Post is working to undermine those who are fighting corruption in the courts and the banks. And then the same Nottingham Post can't investigate harassment and brutalisation of Melanie Shaw. So it's pretty blatant what's going on, Mike.
Of course, that letter from the MP to the residents, absolutely cynically designed to remove, or to at least poke a stick in to try and remove that support that Tom Crawford has at the moment.
Yeah. Well, if you want to know what's really going on and how bad it can get, let's just pop over to the USA, where a number of people warning about this, which is Satanist groups have succeeded in erecting a statue of Baphomet. This has been put up in Detroit as the latest place, with a big celebration in a venue complete with upside down cross that you can see there. We just like to remind our audience that if we've got Satanism growing in the USA, of course it's our own government that's approved Satanism for use on board ships of the Royal Navy. And is it a surprise that we've got child abuse soaring in both countries? Some people might say it's a coincidence, but I think we're going to say there's something rather darker going on here, which requires some serious investigation. Well, that brings us to the end of a slightly elongated news today. Any announcements, Mike?
Crane Report Fracking Nightmare on as usual tonight, beginning at 7:30.
Okay,
join us then.
Excellent. A couple of you have asked about this booklet from Justin Walker about austerity. It's just a huge provable lie. We will put out more information about how you can get hold of that. Thank you for joining us. Please, if you can do something to assist the child abuse victims, how about picking up the phone, emailing the Goddard inquiry to see just what Justice Goddard is going to do to protect child abuse victims and whistleblowers. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.